Shalom, 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 everybody. It's your boy Shalom. What's up, man? We here with the next law, next reading. The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene, the Joyce Elford's book. The next law is going to be law 44, man. We only got 4 more laws to go. And I'm reading 2 today, 44, 45. 44 right now, 45 later on today. Tomorrow, 46 and 47, Lord willing. We'll see. We'll see how I feel. I might just do lives throughout the day and get them out the way. We'll see. We'll see. But we're going to soon be finished with this book, man. We only got 4 pages left, man. 4 pages. Oh, man, it's a big book. Big book for me, anyway. But Law 44. Disarm and infuriate with the mirror effect. All right. Judgment. The mirror reflects reality, but it is also the perfect tool for deception. When you mirror your enemies, doing exactly as they do, they cannot figure out your strategy. The mirror effect mocks and humiliates them, making them overreact. By holding up a mirror to their psyches, you seduce them with the illusion that you share their values. By holding up a mirror to their actions, you teach them a lesson. Few can resist the power of the mirror effect. Excuse me. Yeah, I do that right now. Mirror effect, preliminary typology. Mirrors have the power to disturb us. Gazing at our reflection in the mirror, we most often see what we want to see, the image of ourselves with which we are most comfortable. We tend not to look too closely, ignoring the wrinkles and blemishes. But if we do look hard at the reflected image, we sometimes feel that we are seeing ourselves as others see us, as a person among other people, an object rather than a subject. That feeling makes us shudder. We see ourselves, but from the outside, minus the thoughts, spirit, and soul that fill our consciousness. We are a thing. In using mirror effects, we symbolically react to the In using mirror effects, we symbolically recreate this disturbing power by mirroring the actions of the other people, mimicking the movements to unsettle and infuriate them, made to feel mocked, cloned, object-like, an image without a soul. They get angry or do the same thing slightly differently, and they might feel disarmed. You have perfectly reflected their wishes and desires. This is the narcissistic power of mirrors. In either case, the mirror effect unsettles your targets, whether angering or entrancing them. The effect contains great power because it operates on the most primitive emotions. There are 4 main mirror effects in the realm of power. The neutralizing effect. In ancient Greek mythology, the Gorgon Medusa had serpents for hair, protruding tongue, massive teeth, and a face so ugly that anyone who gazed at her was turned into stone out of fright. But the hero Perseus managed to slay Medusa by polishing his bronze shield into a mirror, then using the reflection in the mirror to guide him as he crept up to cut off her head without looking at her directly. If the shield in this instance was a mirror, the mirror also was a kind of shield. Medusa could not see Perseus. She saw only her own reflected actions. And behind this screen, the hero stole up and destroyed her. This is the essence of the neutralizing effect. Do what your enemies do. Follow their actions as best you can. And they cannot see what you are up to. They are blinded by your mirror. Their strategy for dealing with you depends on your reacting to them in a way characteristic of you. Neutralize it by playing a game of mimicry with them. The tactic has a mocking, even infuriating effect. Most of us remember the childhood experience of someone teasing us by repeating our words exactly. After a while, usually not long, we wanted to punch them in the face. Working more subtly as an adult, you can still unsettle your opponents this way, shielding your own strategy with the mirror. You lay invisible traps or push your opponents into the traps they planned for you. This powerful technique has been used in military strategy since the days of Sun Tzu. In our own time, it often appears in political campaigning. It is also useful for disguising those situations in which you have no particular strategy yourself. This is the warrior's mirror. A reverse version of the neutralizing effect is the shadow. You shadow your opponent's every move without their seeing you. Use the shadow to gather information that will neutralize their strategy later on, when you will be able to thwart their every move. The shadow is effective because to follow the movements of others is to gain valuable insight into their habits and routines. The shadow is the preeminent device for detectives and spies. The narcissist effect. Gazing at the image in the waters of the pond, the Greek youth Narcissus fell in love with it. And when he found out that the image was his own reflection and that he therefore could not consummate his love, he despaired and drowned himself. All of us have a similar problem. We are profoundly in love with ourselves. But since this love excludes a love object outside of ourselves, it remains consciously unsatisfied and unfulfilled. The narcissist effect plays on this universal narcissism. You look deep into the souls of other people, fathom their inmost desires, their values, their tastes, their spirit, and you reflect it back to them, making yourself into a kind of mirror image. Your ability to reflect their psyche gives you great power over them. They may even feel the tinge of love. This is simply the ability to mimic another person, not physically, but psychologically. And it is immensely powerful because it plays upon the unsatisfied self-love of a child. Normally, people bombard us with their experiences, their tastes. They hardly ever make the effort to see things through our eyes. This is annoying, but it also creates great opportunity. If you can show you understand another person by reflecting their inmost feelings, they will be entranced and disarmed. All the more so because it happens so rarely. No one can resist this feeling of being harmoniously reflected in the outside world, even though you might well be manufacturing it for their benefit and for deceptive purposes of your own. The narcissist effect works wonders in both social life and business. It gives us both a verbal argument is extremely limited and often accomplishes the opposite of what is intended. As Greene remarks, the truth is generally seen, rarely heard. The truth is generally seen and rarely heard. The moral is a perfect way to demonstrate your ideas through action. Quite simply, you teach others a lesson by giving them a taste of their own medicine. In the moral effect, you mirror what other people have done to you, and do so in a way that makes them realize you are doing to them exactly what they did to you. You make them feel that their behavior has been unpleasant, as opposed to hearing you complain and whine about it, which only gets their defenses up. And as they feel the result of their actions mirrored back at them, they realize in the profoundest sense how they hurt or punish others with their unsocial behavior. You objectify the qualities you want them to feel ashamed of and create a mirror in which they can gaze at their follies and learn a lesson about themselves. This technique is often used by educators, psychologists, and anyone who has to deal with an unpleasant and unconscious behavior. This is the teacher's mirror. Whether or not there are actually anything wrong with the way people have treated you, however, it can often be to your advantage to reflect it back to them in a way that makes them feel guilty about it. The hallucinatory effect. The hallucinatory effect. Mirrors are tremendously deceptive, for they create a sense that you are looking at the real world. Actually, though, you are only staring at a piece of glass, which as everyone knows, cannot show the world exactly as it is. Everything in a mirror is reversed. When Alice goes through the looking glass in Lewis Carroll's book, she enters a world that is back to front, and more than just visually. The hallucinatory effect comes from creating a perfect copy of an object, a place, a person. This copy acts as a kind of dummy. People take it for the real thing because it has the physical appearance of the real thing. This is the preeminent technique of con artists who strategically mimic the real world to deceive you. It also has applications in any arena that requires camouflage. This is the deceiver's mirror. Observance of mirror effects. Observance of the law. Observance 1. In February of 1815, the Emperor Napoleon escaped from the island of Elba, where he had been imprisoned by the Allied forces of Europe, and returned to Paris in a march that stirred the French nation, rallying troops and citizens of all classes to his side and chasing his successor, King Louis the 18th, off the throne. By March, however, having reestablished himself in power, he had to face the fact that France's situation had greatly changed. The country was devastated. He had no allies among the other European nations, and his most loyal and important ministers had deserted him or left the country. Only one man. DJ, come here. DJ. My bad. Excuse me. Observance 1. By March, however, having reestablished himself in power, he had to face the fact that France's situation had gravely changed. The country was devastated. He had no allies among the other European nations, and his most loyal and important ministers had deserted him and left the country. Only one man remained from the old regime, Joseph Fouché, his former minister of police. Napoleon had relied on Fouché to do his dirty work throughout his previous reign. but he had never been able to figure his minister out. He had kept a corps of agents to spy on all of his ministers so that he would always have an edge on them. But no one had gotten anything on Fouché. If suspected of some misdeed, the minister would not get angry or take accusation personally. He would submit, nod, smile, and change colors chameleon-like, adapting to the requirements of the moment. At first, this had seemed somewhat pleasant and charming, but after a while it frustrated Napoleon, who felt outdone by this slippery man. At one time or another, he had fired all of his most important ministers, including Talleyrand, but he never touched Fouché. And so, in 1815, back in power and in need of help, he felt he had no choice but to reappoint Fouché as the Minister of Police. Several weeks into his new reign, Napoleon's spies told him they believed Fouché was in secret contact with ministers of foreign countries, including Metternich of Austria. Afraid that his most valuable minister was betraying him to his enemies, Napoleon had to find out the truth before it was too late. He could not confront Fouché directly. In person, the man was as slippery as an eel. He needed hard proof. This seemed to come in April, when the emperor's private police captured the Viennese gentleman who had come to Paris to pass information on to Fouché. Ordering the man brought before him, Napoleon threatened to shoot him then and there unless he confessed. The man broke down and admitted he had given Fouché a letter from Metternich, written in invisible ink, arranging for a secret meeting of special agents in Basel. Napoleon accordingly ordered one of his own agents to infiltrate this meeting. If Fouché was indeed planning to betray him, he would finally be caught red-handed and would hang. Napoleon waited impatiently for the agent's return, but to his bewilderment, the agent showed up days later reporting that he had heard nothing that would implicate Fouché in a conspiracy. In fact, it seemed that the other agents present suspected Fouché of double-crossing them, as if he were working for Napoleon all along. Napoleon did not believe this for an instant. Fouché had somehow outwitted him again. The following morning, Fouché visited Napoleon and remarked, "By the way, sire, I never told you that I had a letter from Metternich a few days ago. My mind was full of things of greater moments. My mind was so full of things of greater moment. Besides, his emissary omitted to give me the powder needed to make the writings legible. Here at length is the letter." Sure that Fouché is toying with him, Napoleon exploded. "You are a traitor, Fouché. I ought to have you hanged." He continued to harangue Fouché, but could not fire him without proof. Fouché only expressed amazement at the emperor's words, but inwardly he smiled, for all along he had been playing the mirroring game. Interpretation. Fouché had known for years that Napoleon kept on top of those around him by spying on them day and night. The minister had survived this game by having his own spies spy on Napoleon's spies, thus neutralizing any action Napoleon might take against him. In the case of the meeting in Basel, he even turned the tables. Knowing about Napoleon's double agent, he set it up so that it would appear as if Fouché were a royal double agent too. Fouché gained power and flourished in a period of great tumult by mirroring those around him. During the French Revolution, he had a radical Jacobean. After the Terror, he became a moderate Republican. And under Napoleon, he became a committed imperialist whom Napoleon ennobled and made the Duke of Otranto. If Napoleon took up the weapon of digging up dirt on people, Fouché made sure he had the dirt on Napoleon as well, and on everyone else. On Napoleon as well as on everyone else. This also allowed him to predict the emperor's plan and desires. so that he could echo his boss's sentiments before he had even uttered them, shielding his actions with the mirror strategy. Fouché could also plot offensive moves without being caught in the act. This is the power of mirroring those around you. First, you give people the feeling that you share their thoughts and goals. Second, if they suspect you have ulterior motives, the mirror shields you from them, preventing them from figuring out your strategy. Eventually, this will infuriate and unsettle them. By playing the double, you steal their thunder, suck away their initiative, make them feel helpless. You also gain the ability to choose when and how to unsettle them, another avenue to power. And the mirror saves you mental energy. Simply echoing the moves of others gives you the space you need to develop a strategy of your own. Observance 2. Early in his career, the ambitious statesman and general Alcibiades of Athens in 450 to 404 BC fashioned a formidable weapon that became the source of his power. In every encounter with others, he would sense their moods and tastes, their carefully tailor his words and actions to mirror their inmost desires. He would seduce them with the idea that their values were superior to everyone else's, and that his goal was to model himself on them or help them realize their dreams. Few could resist his charm. The first man to fall under his spell was the philosopher Socrates. Alcibiades represented the opposite of the Socratic ideal of simplicity and uprightness. He lived lavishly and was completely unprincipled. Whenever he met Socrates, however, he mirrored the older man's sobriety, eating simply, occupying Socrates on long walks, and taking only of philosophy and virtue. Socrates was not completely fooled. He was not unaware of Alcibiades' other life, but that only made him vulnerable to a logic that fluttered him. Only in my presence, he felt, does this man submit to the virtuous influence. Only in my presence, he felt, does this man submit to a virtuous influence. Only I have such power over him. This feeling intoxicated Socrates, who became Alcibiades' fervent admirer and supporter, one day even risking his own life to rescue the young man in battle. The Athenians considered Alcibiades their greatest orator, for he had an uncanny ability to tune into his audience's aspirations and mirror their desires. He made his greatest speech in support of the invasion of Sicily, which he thought would bring great wealth to Athens and limitless glory to himself. The speeches gave impression to young Athenians, thirst to conquer lands for themselves, rather than living off the victories of their ancestors. But he also tailored his words to reflect older men's nostalgia for the glory years when Athens led the Greeks against Persia and then went on to create an empire. All Athens now dreamed of conquering Sicily. Alcibiades' plan was approved, and he was made the expedition's commander. While Alcibiades was leading the invasion of Sicily, however, certain Athenians fabricated charges against him of profaning sacred statues. He knew his enemies would have him executed if he returned home, so at the last minute he deserted the Athenian fleet and defected to Athens' bitter enemy, Sparta. The Spartans welcomed this great man to their side, but they knew his reputation and were wary of him. Alcibiades loved luxury. The Spartans loved luxury. The Spartans were a warrior people who worshiped austerity, and they were afraid he would corrupt their youth. But much to their relief, the Alcibiades who arrived in Sparta was not at all what they expected. He wore his hair untrimmed as they did, took cold baths, ate coarse bread and black broth, and wore simple clothes. To the Spartans, this signified that he had come to see their way of life as superior to the Athenian, greater than they were. He had chosen to be a Spartan rather than being born one, and should thus be honored above others. He fell under his spell. They fell under his spell. It gave him great powers. He managed to bet. I'm gonna kill you. This time, Alcibiades defected to Persia, where he suddenly went from Spartan simplicity to embracing the lavish Persian lifestyle, down to the last detail. It was, of course, immensely flattering to the Persians to see a Greek of Alcibiades' stature prefer their culture over his own, and they showered him with honors, land, and power. Once seduced by the mirror, they failed to notice that behind this shield, Alcibiades was playing a double game, secretly helping the Athenians in their war with Sparta, and thus reingratiating himself. And thus reingratiating himself with the city to which he desperately wanted to return, and which welcomed him back with open arms in 408 BC. Interpretation. Early in his political career, Alcibiades made a discovery that changed his whole approach to power. He had a colorful and forceful personality, but when he argued his ideas strongly with other people, he would win over a few while at the same time alienating many more. The secret to gaining ascendancy over large numbers, he came to believe, was not to impose his colors, but to absorb the colors of those around him, like a chameleon. Once people fell for the trick, the deceptions he went on to practice would be invisible to them. Understand, everyone is wrapped up in their own narcissistic shell. When you try to impose your own ego on them, a wall goes up, resistance is increased. By mirroring them, however, you seduce them into a kind of narcissistic rapture. They are gazing at a double of their own soul. This double is actually manufactured in its entirety by you. Once you have used the mirror. Oh, okay. Well, you got to wait till I'm done reading, all right? Y'all can come in here and with me if y'all want. All right, that's fine. Just should be quiet. All right. Observance number 3. In 1652, the recent widowed Baroness Mancini moved her family from Rome to Paris, where she could count on the influence and protection of her brother Cardinal Mazarin. Cardinal Mazarin, the French prime minister. Of the Baroness' 5 daughters, 4 dazzled the court with their beauty and high spirits. These infamously charming nieces of Cardinal Mazarin became known as the Marinites, and soon found themselves invited to all the most important court functions. One daughter, Marie Mancini, did not share this good fortune, for she lacked the beauty and grace of her sisters, who, along with her mother and even Cardinal Mazarin, eventually came to dislike her, for they felt she spoiled the family image. The ugly duckling. They tried to persuade her to enter a convent now, where she would be less of an embarrassment, but she refused. Instead, she applied herself to her studies, learning Latin and Greek, perfecting her French, and practicing her musical skills. On the rare occasion when the family would let her attend court affairs, she trained herself to be an artful listener, sizing people up for their weaknesses and hidden desires. And when she finally met the future King Louis XIV in 1657, Louis was 17 years old, Marie 18, she decided that to spite her family and uncle, she would find a way to make this young man fall in love with her. This was a seemingly impossible task for such a plain-looking girl, but Marie studied the future king closely. She noticed that her sister's frivolity did not please him, and she sensed that he loathed the scheming and petty politicking that went on all around him. She saw that he had romantic nature. He read adventure novels, insisted on marching at the head of his armies, and had high ideals of a passion for glory. The court had not fed armies, the court did not feed armies and had high ideals. Instead, insisted on marching at the head of his armies and had high ideals and a passion for glory. The court did not feed these fantasies of his. It was a banal, superficial world that bored him. The key to Louis's heart, Marie saw, would be the construct of a mirror reflecting his fantasies and his youthful yearnings for glory and romance. To begin with, she immersed herself in the romantic novels, poems, and plays that she knew the young king read voraciously. When Louis began to engage her in conversation, to his delight, she would talk of the things that stirred his soul, not this fashion or that piece of gossip, but rather courtly love, the deeds of great knights, the nobility of past kings and heroes. She fed his thirst for glory by creating an image of an august, superior king whom he could aspire to become. She stirred his imagination. As the future Sun King spent more and more time with Marie in Marie's presence, it eventually became clear that he had fallen in love with the least likely young woman of the court. To the horror of her sisters and mother, he showered Marie Mancini with attention. He brought her along on his military campaigns and made a show of stationing her where he could watch as he marched into battle. Where she could watch as he marched into battle. He even promised Marie that he would marry her and make her queen. Mazarin, however, would never allow the king to marry his niece, a woman who could bring France no diplomatic or royal alliances. Louis had to marry a princess of Spain or Austria. In 1658, Louis succumbed to the pressure and agreed to break off the first romantic involvement of his life. He did so with much regret, and at the end of his life, he acknowledged that he never loved anyone as much as Marie Mancini. Interpretation. Marie Mancini played the seducer's game to perfection. First, she took a step back to study her prey. Seduction often fails to get past the first step because it is too aggressive. The first move must always be a retreat. By studying the king from a distance, Marie saw what disguised him from others: his high ideals, romantic nature, and snobbish disdain for petty politics. Marie's next step was to make a mirror for these hidden yearnings on Louis's part, letting him glimpse what he himself could be, a godlike king. This mirror had several functions: satisfying Louis's ego by giving him a double to look at. It also focused on him so exclusively as to give him the feeling that Marie existed for him alone. Surrounded by a pack of scheming courtiers who only had their own self-interest at heart, he cannot fail to be touched by this devotional focus. Finally, Marie's mirror set up an ideal for him to live up to: the noble king of medieval court. To a soul both romantic and ambitious, nothing could be more intoxicating than to have someone hold up an idolized reflection of him. In effect, it was Marie Mancini who created the image of the Sun King. Indeed, Louis later admitted the enormous part she had played in fashioning his radiant self-image. This is the power of the seducer's image. By doubling the taste and ideals of the target, it shows your attention to his or her psychology. An attention more charming But doubtedly by doubling the taste and ideals of the target, It shows your attention to his or her psychology, an attention more charming than any aggressive pursuit. Find out what sets the other person apart. Then hold up the mirror that will reflect it and bring it out of them. Feed their fantasies of power and greatness by reflecting their ideals, and they will succumb. Woo-wee. Woo-wee. Observance number 4. I'm about to sit back up. Shit. But the little stuff I just ain't always help. Observance number 4. In 1538, with the death of his mother Helena, the eight-year-old future King Ivan IV, or Ivan the Terrible, of Russia became an orphan. For the next 5 years, he watched as the princely class and the boyars terrorized the country, now and then to mock the young Ivan. They would make him wear a crown and a scepter and place him on the throne. When the little boy's feet dangled over the edge of the chair, they would laugh and lift him off it, handing him from man to man in the air, making him feel his helplessness compared to them. When Ivan was 13, he boldly murdered the boyar leader and ascended to the throne. For the next few decades, he struggled to subdue the boyars' power, but they continued to defy him. By 1575, his efforts to transform Russia and defeat its enemies had exhausted him. Meanwhile, his subjects were complaining bitterly about the endless wars, his secret police, the unvanquished and oppressive warriors. His own mistresses began to question his moves. Finally, he had had enough. In 1564, he had temporarily abandoned the throne, forcing his subjects to call him back to power. Now he took the strategy of a step further and abducted. To take his place, Ivan elevated a general of his, Simon Bek-Bulatovic, to the throne. But although Simon had recently converted to Christianity, he was to birth a Tartar, and his enthronement was an insult to Ivan's subjects, since Russians looked down on the Tartars as inferior and infidels. Yet Ivan ordered that all Russians, including the boyars, pledge obedience to their new ruler. And while Simon moved into the Kremlin, Ivan lived in a humble house in Moscow's outskirts, from which he would sometimes visit the palace. Bow before the throne, sit among the other boyars, and humbly petition Simon for favors. Ba, 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 ba. Over time, it became clear that Simon was kind of king's double. He dressed like Ivan and acted like Ivan, but he had no real power since no one would really obey him. The boyars at the court, who were old enough to remember taunting Ivan when he was a boy by placing him on the throne, saw the connection. They had made Ivan feel like a weak pretender, so now he mirrored them by placing a weak pretender of his own on the throne. For 2 long years, Ivan had held the mirror of Simon up to the Russian people. The mirror said, "Your whining and disobedience have made me a czar with no real power." So I will reflect back to you, a czar with no real power. You have treated me disrespectfully, so I will do the same to you, making Russia the laughing stock of the world. In 1577, the name of Russia's people, the chastised boyars, once again begged Ivan to return to the throne, which he did. He lived as Tsar until his death. In 1584, and when conspiracies, complaining, and second-guessing disappeared along with Simon. Interpretation. In 1564, after threatening to abdicate, Ivan had been granted absolute powers. But these powers had slowly been chipped away as in every sector of society, the boyars, the church, the government vied for more control. Foreign wars had exhausted the country. Internal bickering had increased, and Ivan's attempts to respond had been met with scorn. Russia had turned into a kind of boisterous classroom in which the pupils laughed openly at the teacher. If he raised his voice or complained, he only met more resistance. He had to teach them a lesson, give them a taste of their own medicine. Simon Bekbulatovic was the mirror he used to do so. After 2 years in which the throne had been an object of ridicule and disgust, the Russian people learned their lesson. They wanted their Tsar back. Conceding to him all the dignity and respect that the position should always have commanded. For the rest of his reign, Russia and Ivan got along fine. Understand, people are locked in their own experiences. When you whine about some insensitivity on their part, they may seem to understand, but inwardly they are untouched and even more resistant. The goal of power is always to lower people's resistance to you. For this, you need tricks, and one trick is to teach them a lesson. Instead of haranguing, let me look it up. Harrowing. Haranguing. Let's see. Hara. A long and forceful speech. Harangue. Instead of haranguing people verbally, then create a kind of mirror of their behavior. In doing so, you leave them two choices. They can ignore you, or they can start to think about themselves. And even if they ignore you, you will have planted a seed in their unconscious that will eventually take root. When you mirror their behavior, incidentally, do not be afraid to add a touch of caricature and exaggeration, as Ivan did by enthroning a Tartar. It is the little spice in the soup that will open their eyes and make them see the ridiculousness of their own actions. Observance number 5. Dr. Milton H. Erickson, a pioneer in strategic psychotherapy, would often educate his patients powerfully, but indirectly by creating a kind of mirror effect, constructing an analogy to make patients see the truth on their own. He would bypass their resistance to change. When Dr. Erickson treated married couples complaining of sexual problems, for instance, he often found that therapy's tradition of direct confrontation and problem airing only heightened the spouse's resistance and sharpened their differences. Instead, he would draw on a husband and a wife out on other topics, often banal ones, trying to find an analogy for the sexual conflict. In one couple's first section, the pair was discussing their eating habits, especially at dinner. The wife preferred the leisurely approach and drink before the meal, some appetizers, and then a small main course, all at a slow, civilized pace. This frustrated the husband. He wanted to get dinner over quickly and to dig right into the main course. The bigger, the better. As the conversation continued, the couple began to catch glimpses of an analogy to their problems in bed. The moment they made this connection, however, Dr. Erickson would change the subject, carefully avoiding a discussion of the real problem. The couple thought Erickson was just getting to know them and would deal with the problem directly the next time he saw them. But at the end of the first session, Dr. Erickson directed them to arrange a dinner a few nights away that would combine each person's desires. The wife would get a slow meal, including time spent bonding, and the husband would get the big dishes he wanted to eat. Without realizing they were acting under the doctor's gentle guidance, the couple would walk into the mirror of their problem, and in the mirror they would solve their problems themselves, ending the evening just as the doctor had hoped, by mirroring the improved dinner dynamics in bed. In dealing with more severe problems, such as the schizophrenic's mirror fantasy, in dealing with more severe problems, such as I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're saying. All right. Hey, if you're going to be in here, that's fine. But you got to sit down and listen. You can come sit down here or you can sit down over there. Which one is it going to be? You want to sit down right there or you going to sit down right here? By me, so you can read. All right. That's good. Sit down over there. Where are you going? You sitting on me or you sitting over there? Okay, then sit over there. There you go. No, don't jump. Sit. Sit. There you go. That's fine. Sit there. All right. In dealing with more severe problems, such as schizophrenics, mirror fantasy world of his or her own creation, Dr. Erickson would always try to enter the mirror and work within it. He once treated a hospital inmate who believed he saw Jesus Christ draping sheets around his body, talking in vague parables, and bombarding staff and patients with endless Christian proselytizing. No therapy or drugs seemed to work until one day, Dr. Erickson went up to the young man and said, "I understand you have had experience as a carpenter." Being Christ, the patient had to say that he had had such experience, and Erickson immediately put him to work building bookcases and other useful items, allowing him to wear his Jesus garb. Over the next weeks, as the patient worked on these projects, his mind became less occupied with Jesus fantasies and more focused on his labor. As the carpenter work took precedence, a psychic shift took effect. The religious fantasies remained, but faded comfortably into the background, allowing the man to function in society. Interpretation. Communication depends on metaphors and symbols, which are the basis of language itself. A metaphor is a kind of mirror to the concrete and real, which it often expresses more clearly and deeply than the literal description does. When you are dealing with the intractable willpower of other people, direct communication often only heightens their resistance. This happens most clearly when you complain about people's behavior, particularly in sensitive areas such as their lovemaking. You will affect a far more lasting change if, like Dr. Erickson, you construct an analogy, a symbolic mirror of the situation, and guide the other through it. As Christ himself understood, talking in parables is often the best way to teach the lesson, for it allows people to realize the truth on their own. When dealing with people who are lost in their reflections of fantasy worlds, including a host of people who do not live in mental hospitals, never try to push them into reality by shattering their mirrors. Instead, enter their world and operate inside it, under their rules, gently guiding them out of the hall of mirrors they have entered. Observance number 6. Ooh-wee. Ooh-wee. Man. Observance number 6. The great 16th century Japanese tea master Takano Shoyo once passed by a house and noticed a young man watering flowers near his front gate. Two things caught Shoyo's attention. First, the graceful way the man performed his task, and second, the stunningly beautiful rows of Sharon blossoms that bloomed in the garden. He stopped and introduced himself to the man, whose name was Sen no Rikyu. Shoyo wanted to stay, but he had a prior engagement and had to hurry off. Before he left, however, Rikyu invited him to take tea with him the following morning. Shoyo happily accepted. When Shoyo opened the garden gate the next day, he was horrified to see that not a single flower remained. More than anything else, he had come to see a rose of Sharon blossoms that he had not had in time to appreciate. Excuse me. More than anything else, he had come to see the rows of Sharon blossoms that he had not had the time to appreciate the day before. Now disappointed, he started to leave, but at the gate he stopped himself and decided to enter Sen no Rikyu's tea room. Immediately inside, he stopped in his tracks and gazed in astonishment. Before him, a vase hung from the ceiling, and in the vase stood a single rose of Sharon blossom, the most beautiful in the garden. Somehow, Sen no Rikyu had read his guest's thoughts, and with this one eloquent gesture, had demonstrated that this day guest and host would be in perfect harmony. Sen no Rikyu went on to become the most famous tea master of all, and his trademark was his uncanny ability to harmonize himself with his guests' thoughts, and to think one step ahead, enchanting them by adapting to their tastes. One day, Rikyu was invited to tea by Yamashina Hachiguan, Yamashina Hachiguan, an admirer of the tea ceremony, but also a man with a vivid sense of humor. When Rikyu arrived at Hachiguan's home, he found the garden gate shut, so he opened it to look for the host. On the other side of the gate, he saw that someone had first dug a ditch, then carefully covered it over with canvas and earth. Realizing that Hachiguan had played the practical joke, he obligingly walked right into the ditch, muddying his clothes in the process. Apparently horrified, Hachiguan came running out and hurried Rikyu to the bath that, for some inexplicable reason, stood already prepared. After bathing, Rikyu joined Hachiguan in the tea ceremony, which both enjoyed immensely, sharing a laugh about the incident. When Sen no Rikyu explained to a friend that he had heard about Hachiguan's practical joke beforehand, but since it should always be one's aim to conform to the wishes of one's host, I fell into the hole knowingly and thus assured the success of the meeting. Tea is by no one's mere obsequiousness. Obsequiousness. T is by no means mere obsequiousness. Let's see. Obsequiousness. OBS. EQUIOUSNESS. Obsequiousness. Obsequiousness. Oh, OBS. Hey, leave my stuff alone. Get out of there. Get out of there, DJ and man. Amen. OBSE. OBSE. Obsequious. Self-abasing. Self-abasing. Obsequious. Hold on. Obsequious. T is by no means mere obsequiousness. You done? That's all you want? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Come here. I said, yes, sir. You ain't going nowhere till you say it. You ain't going nowhere till you say it. It's yes, sir. Oh, thank you, Daddy. I didn't hear that either. Thank you, Daddy. Thank you, Daddy. Thank you, Daddy. Thank you, Daddy. That's what I want to hear. Thank you, Daddy. So pick a head. You ain't gonna get no more water. I'm not gonna give you no water. I know you know what to say. You want some water too? You want some water too? All right, there we go. All right. T is by no means mere obsequiousness, but there is no T where the host and guest are not in harmony with one another. Hachiquin's vision of the dignified Senrikyo at the bottom of a ditch had pleased him endlessly, but Rikyo had gained a pleasure of his own in complying with the host's wishes and watching him amuse himself in this way. Interpretation. Hey, calm down, sons. Senrikyo was no magician or seer. He watched those around him acutely, plumbing the subtle gestures that revealed a hidden desire, then producing that desire's image. All those show you, huh? Hey, calm down. What is it? No, leave my stuff alone. Huh? No, sir, you can't have the drum right now. Not right now. After I finish reading, I'll let you get the drum. All right? All right. Senrikyo was no seer. Was no magician or seer. He watched those around him acutely, plumbing the subtle gestures that revealed a hidden desire, then producing that desire's image. Although Shoyo never spoke of being enchanted by the rose of Sharon blossoms, Rikyo read it in his eyes. If mirroring a person's desires meant falling into a ditch, so be it. Rikyo's power resided in his successful use of the courtier's mirror, which gave him the appearance of an unusual ability to see into other people. Learn to manipulate the courtier's mirror, for it will bring a great power. Study people's eyes. Hey, put it against the wall. Put the broom against the wall. No, sir, against the wall by my other tools. Put it against the wall by my other tools over there. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Right there, and leave it alone. Don't touch it again. Thank you. Thank you. Learn to manipulate the courtier's mirror, for it will bring you great power. Study people's eyes, follow their gestures, sure barometers of pain and pleasure than any spoken word. Notice and remember the details, the clothing, the choice of friends, the daily habits, the tossed out remarks, the reveal hidden and rarely indulged desires. Soak it all in. Find out what lies under the surface. Then make yourself the mirror of their unspoken selves. That is the key to this power. The other person has not asked for your consideration, has not mentioned his pleasure in his roles of sharing. And when you reflect it back to him, his pleasure is heightened because it was unasked for. Remember, the wordless communication, the indirect compliment, contains the most power. Remember, the wordless communication, the indirect compliment, contains the most power. No one can resist the enchantment of the courtier's mirror. Observance number 7. Observance number 7. Yellow Kid Will, con artist extraordinaire, used the deceiver's mirror in his most brilliant cons. Most audacious of all was his reenaction of a bank in Munich, or in Muncie, Indiana. When Rail read one day that the merchant's bank in Muncie had moved, he saw an opportunity he could not pass up. Well rented out the original merchant's building, which still contained bank furniture, complete with teller windows. He bought money bags, stencil of banks the stencil of banks' invented name on them, filled them with steel washers, and arrayed them impressively behind the teller windows, along with bundles of boodle. Bundles of boodle. What's boodle? Boodle. I guess it's like money. I wonder if it's like money. Bundles of boodle. 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 Bundles of boodle. Booty. Boodle. Boodles are not in here. Yeah, boodles are not in here. Bundles of boodles. Real bills hiding newspapers cut to size. Okay. Real bills hiding newspapers cut to size. For his bank staffs and customers, Will hired gamblers, bookies, girls from local bawdy houses, and other assorted confederates. He even had a local thug pose as a bank dick, claiming to be the broker for a certificate investment the bank was offering. Weld would fish the waters and hook the proper wealthy sucker. He would bring this man to the bank and ask to see the president. An officer of the bank would tell them that they had to wait, which only heightened the realism of the con. One always has to wait to see the bank president. And as they waited, the bank would bustle with bank-like activity, as call girls and bookies in disguise floated in and out, making deposits and withdrawals and tipping their hats to the phony bank dick. Lulled by this perfect copy of reality, the sucker would just deposit $50,000 into the fake bank without a worry in the world. I wonder if that's still being done. I bet that's still being done today. Over the years, Will did the same thing with a deserted yacht club and an abandoned brokerage office, a relocated real estate office, and a completely realistic gambling club. Interpretation. The mirroring of reality offers immense deceptive powers. The right uniform, the perfect accent, the proper props. The deception cannot be deciphered. The deception cannot be deciphered because it is enmeshed in a simulation of reality. People have an intense desire and need to believe, and their first instinct is to trust a well-concentrated facade to make it for reality. After all, we cannot go around doubting the reality of everything we see. We would be too exhausting. That would be too exhausting. You all right? Do you want some water? All right. We habitually accept appearances, and this is a credulity. A credulity you can use. A credulity you can use. What is like credit? Credulity. Credulity. A credulity. 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 C-R-U-D. C-R-U, I mean C-R, my bad, C-R-E, I'm tripping. C-R-E. Hey, both of y'all need to calm down in there. C-R-E-D. U-L-I-T-Y. It's not in here. Credulity. And this is a credulity you can use. In this particular game, it is the first movement that counts the most. If your sucker suspicions, hey, calm down. Come here. Come here. Come here, boys. Both of you. Come here. What I told you. That is not a room to play in. You understand? You cannot play with my tools. Do not play with them. Look, leave my tools alone. You can either go on the front or you can sit in here with daddy and listen. Which one is it going to be? All right, bye. What you going to do? No, we can't play in there. Go on the front or you sitting here and listen. All right. In this particular game, it is the first moment that counts the most. If your sucker suspicions are not raised by their first glance at the mirror's reflection, they will stay suppressed. Once they enter into your hall of mirrors, they will be unable to disguise the real from the fake, and it will become easier and easier to deceive them. Remember, study the world's surfaces and learn to mirror them in your habits, your manner, your clothes. Like a carnivorous plant to unsuspecting insects, you will look like all the other plants in the field. Authority. The task of a military operation is to accord deceptively with the intentions of the enemy. Get to what they want first. Subtly anticipate them. Maintain discipline and adapt to the enemy. Thus, at first you are like a maiden, so the enemy opens his doors. Then you are like a rabbit on the loose, so that the enemy cannot keep you out. Sun Tzu, 4th century BC. Image. The shield of Perseus. It is polished into a reflecting mirror. Medusa cannot see you, only her own hideousness reflected back at her. Behind such a mirror, you can deceive, mock, and infuriate. With one blow, you sever Medusa's unsuspecting head. A warning: be aware of mirrored situations. Ooh. Be aware of mirror situations. Mirrors contain great powers, but also dangerous reefs, including the mirrored situation. A situation that seems to reflect or closely resemble the previous one, mostly in style and surface appearance. You can often back into such a situation without fully understanding it. while those around you understand it quite well, and compare it to whatever happened before. Most often you suffer by the comparison, seeming either weaker than the previous occupant of your position, or else tainted by any unpleasant association that person has left behind. In 1864, the composer Richard Wagner moved to Munich at the behest of Ludwig II, known variously as the Swan King or the Mad King of Bavaria. Ludwig was Wagner's biggest fan and most generous patron. The strength of his support turned Wagner's head. Once established in Munich under the king's protection, he would be able to say and do whatever he wanted. Wagner moved into a lavish house, which the king eventually bought for him. This house was but a stone's throw from the former home of Lola Montez, the notorious courtesan who had plunged Ludwig II's grandfather into a crisis that had forced him to abdicate. Warned that he could be infected by this association, Wagner only scoffed. "I am no Lola Montez," he said. Soon enough, however, the citizens of Munich began to resent the favors and money showered on Wagner, and dubbed him the second Lola, or Lolat. He unconsciously began to tread in Lola's footsteps, spending money extravagantly, meddling in matters beyond music. Even dabbling in politics and advising the king on cabinet appointments. Meanwhile, Ludwig's affection for Wagner seemed intense and undignified for a king, just like his grandfather's love for Lola Montez. Eventually, Ludwig's ministers wrote him a letter. "Your Majesty now stands at the fateful parting of the ways. You have to choose between the love and respect of your faithful people and the friendship of Richard Wagner." In December of 1865, Ludwig politely asked his friends to leave and never to return. Wagner had inadvertently placed himself in Lola Montez's reflection. Once there, everything he did reminded the stolen Bavarians of that dread woman, and there was nothing he could do about it. Avoid such association effects like the plague. In a mirrored situation, you have little or no control over the reflections and recollections that will be connected to you. And any situation beyond your control is dangerous. Even if the person or event has positive associations, you will suffer from not being able to live up to them, since the past generally appears greater than the present. If you ever notice people associating you with some past event or person, do everything you can to separate yourself from that memory and to shatter that reflection. Whew. That was Law 44. Man, that was a long one. Law 44. Disarm and infuriate with the mirror effect. The mirror reflects reality, but it is also a perfect tool for deception. When you mirror your enemies doing exactly what they do, they cannot figure out your strategy. The mirror effect mocks and humiliates them, making them overreact. By holding up a mirror to their psyches, you seduce them with the illusions that you share their values. By holding up a mirror to their actions, you teach them lessons. Few can resist the power of the mirror effect. That was Law 44. Next time, later on today, we'll come back with Law 45. Preach the need for change, but never reform. My bad. Preach the need for change, but never reform too much at once. Judgment. Everyone understands the need for change in the abstract, but on the day-to-day level, people are creatures of habit. Too much innovation is traumatic and will lead to revolt. If you are new to a position of power or an outsider, if you are new to a position of power on outsider trying to build a power base. Make a show of respect make a show of respecting the old way of doing things. If change is necessary, make it feel like a gentle improvement on the past. Yeah, we'll come back later for that, man. So Shalom, that's the 48 laws of power. That was law 44. Man, we only got we're gonna come back with law 45. We only got 3 laws left after that. 3 laws left. And we'll be finished with the book. And on to the next, Miss Sherazad Ali's book, The Black Woman's Guide to Understanding the Black Man. We'll come back with that. But, you know, a shallow out. Shalom. Shalom, everybody. Hope y'all learned something and enjoyed the law.